Hello, I am Centimus Prime, and this is the LEGO Ninjago Dragons Rising set number 71806, Cole's Elemental Earth Mech. So, I've reviewed this set a while back, and I've basically given my overall thoughts on how this set came together. But to give you a very brief summary of that, basically, I thought the set was overall styled overall had a good look to it, but I of course had some issues with this set. And yeah, after receiving some modded builds from Nick on Planet Ripple, it kind of put me into a sort of uh, set modification kind of mood. And despite giving this mech so many modifications, I had somehow forgot to post a video about that. So this is what I'm gonna do today. I've been in the mood to make some modifications to some various sets, so I figured why not start off with one that's honestly very overdue. So, starting off, let's go ahead and start simple with the torso. So we can go ahead and rip off the limbs so we have a better. Let's go ahead and set the limbs off to the side and go ahead and start things off with the torso so we can get right into it. Let's open this up. Get Cole out of the seat. And we'll start things off simple with a little bit of tiling. So we can go ahead and tile up the back of the back, like the interior. We can add some interior detailing to the mech a little bit. With a couple of gray pieces. And then also adding a couple of black slope pieces to the sides here to help fill this out a bit, giving us a decent look there. Then something you can do if you really want to is you can I guess do something like that maybe. Yeah, for now we'll just do that, to add a little bit of extra detailing to the back, if that's something you want to do. Now there are going to be a couple of more significant modifications to the torso, one of which is more of an optional thing, and that is with these rounded portions up here, next to on either side of where the head is. Now I've heard that some people had issues with how rounded this portion is, and they prefer how they didn't like how smooth and rounded that was compared to the rest of the mech. I personally didn't really find that much issue with it, but if you want to, there are definitely a few ways of adding that greebling. So let's go ahead and remove these and replace them with a couple of these small assemblies I've made, only using a couple pieces each, simply by using a black 2x4 plate, a Nexonite tile, as well as one of these curved tiles for each shoulder. And then we just add to those to there to give us a more greebled, angular look to either side of the head, which gives it a nice gruffer texturing there. And then And then as for the gap you see here, where Cole is, you have like this ginormous gap here in the torso. Well, thankfully we have a solution for that too, and that is this thing. So this is a small, simple assembly. It's basically built around a simple bracket with like a cheese slope, a couple of pieces added to the front, as well as some pieces added to here, as well as like a handlebar kind of piece, as well as like some texturing pieces. So you have this little assembly. It's not that complicated. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to attach this assembly onto this CCBS chest panel using these two studs over here by connecting that onto the anti-studs like shown back here. We have an extra added bit of like greebling and stuff, which when closed up, not only does it look significantly better by filling in a very obvious gap, but also adds a little bit of extra detailing with the pieces inside. Like not only like the clear orange piece, kind of giving him like a sort of dashboard like console thing, which like fits with the color scheme, but also this little handlebar piece. When you look inside, like it kind of works as like an extra little bit of greebling, as well as like a little roll cage sort of detailing. Like that's like one of my more pleasing ones modifications that I'm really proud of. And with that, that's it with the torso. Torso's like modded up, and with like some nice little like optional bits, which ain't totally necessary, but does give you a good like does help with give a more angular look. Now moving on to the arms. Let's go ahead and we'll deal with the hammer later, but let's connect the arms back on. It's got some little gap fillers and too. But moving on to the arms, now, in my opinion, the arms are mostly alright. They do look good from pretty much every angle. Now I would prefer elbows, but like SCCBS, like they haven't really made a more articulated variant of these SCCBS parts. So unless you want to like heavily modify it, rebuild the arms to have elbows, this is honestly fine. What I'm not totally fine with are the hands. The hands are very well. Calling them hands is honestly a very generous description. It's basically just a gray flap that like kind of fused together. Now, there are quite a few ways to modify these so-called hands to actually work better and actually look and work better. And the most simplest way to do that would be to take this off, remove these gray pieces, and swap that piece out with two of these pieces. And so we just add these to there, and then add the fingers to there. And now you have something that looks pretty much just like how it normally does, only this time you now have a bit more articulation there, which totally works very nice. And you can also have like some splay out kind of action there. But if you still find this like hand design to be too simple and like too plain, uh, we can work with that too by we have you covered there too by so we can start things off by removing some of the parts off the arms, remove these orange brackets, remove this finger assembly entirely, remove these, and set this off to the side, as well as the other hinge piece that officially came in the set, because we are going to use those for later. And so what we're going to do, for now, what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these pieces, add it to there, and then what we're going to do is reattach the orange brackets, reattach this piece, and reattach those pieces, and before attaching this piece, we're actually going to remove this gold 2x2 and replace it with a trans orange 1x2, and either a trans orange 1x1, either a rounded one or a squared one. Honestly, either works. And one of these previously mentioned Among Us hinge pieces, and attach it to the corner like that. Then after that, we can attach this assembly to here like before. Only now we have this additional hinge joint to work with. Now, for this, what we can do then is we can add a few of these Exoforce arm pieces in, well, a couple different colors. We'll attach gray on for now. So what we're going to do is we're going to attach a few of these onto here. And there we have a much more articulated take on these. We not only added an additional digits, it also has a good amount of articulation and a thumb. We've also added a thumb to this, so now it actually looks like hands. Ain't that fancy? But one more thing to mention before we move on to another part of the build is the color of what Exoforce fingers you should use. Now, either one kind of works. Like if you want to keep the colors accurate to the set, then dark gray works fine. Or if you want to have the hands fit the color scheme better, you can use the black ones instead to better fit the color scheme. Now, to be honest, either one works, either black or dark bluish gray. I personally like to use the black ones to better fit the color scheme. And so moving on to the hammer. Now, the hammer looks now the hammer from some angles looks really neat. It has like some interesting like texturing on like the faces of the hammer. As and the hilt's not too, and like the sort of staff hilt piece, it ain't too bad either. My issue is this right here because yes, it looks super gappy, but it also ain't that structurally stable because these are kind of free spinning as they please. Now, I've looked at other people's like take on like fixing like some of the issues with this hammer piece, including some simple ones. Like like one of like I am gonna point out this example because this is one that I have like the most problems with is basically just adding another one of these pieces in like so. And then you just basically just either add it like that or like that. It, either like that or like that. And while it is structurally more stable, and while yeah, it is structurally more stable, and it does at least like, and well yeah, like lost in my own thoughts. And while yes, it does seem structurally more stable, I have a couple issues with this. One, it still leaves huge it still leaves a huge nasty gap between the two hammer heads. And the another issue that you might notice is that this method technically uses an illegal building technique by adding unnecessary stress to the pin pieces by inserting them into the tube areas. So not that's not really an option that I'd want to use personally. So with that, how does one modify a hammer to not only add stability eh, but also fill in gaps while also not using any kind of illegal building techniques? And I've came up with a solution. That is these three assemblies. So you have this smaller assembly, which is basically just a Technic lift arm connected to a few system pieces with an in-between studs connection, like so. And the other are two of these assemblies, which is basically just a snot brick, which is basically just a three-studded snot brick, and by adding a 1x1 queso piece with a cheese loop, and also adding this small assembly, and by doubling it, not mirrored, by doubling it, as you can tell, I've I made two identical segments like this rather than making like a rather than just making a sort of mirrored thing. And so this solution I actually quite like. So to assemble this, you take this segment here, attach it onto this pin connection up there like so. Then what we do is when we attach one of these hammerhead pieces, we take one of our assemblies, we attach the single exposed stud and connect it to one of these tube connections, like so. And then for the other hammerhead, we do the same here, where we connect the stud connection onto the tube, like so. And then when we assemble these two chunks together, I say when we assemble the two chunks together, I've came up with a assembly that not only does it not only does it keep the two hammerhead pieces assemblies relatively stable, it also fills in the gaps and adds some much needed detail, and also uses totally uses no type of no illegal building techniques in any kind of way. So I am quite pleased with that. So we can then just attach that there, and then there we have our our hammer our hammer for this mech modified and also looks very pleasing. And now we can move on to the legs. Now the legs are going to be fascinating because this is I feel like the legs are I feel like the parts of the set I feel like needs the most modifications. So to get some things out of the way, let's start with the let's go ahead and continue with the feet real quick. So overall, like in terms of like the overall design of these feet, I honestly don't mind the like foot design, especially from the front, and they look really good. My issue is with the sides of the feet because of how incomplete they look. It gives a you have like way too many studs exposed, way too many studs that break up the color scheme exposed, and then also again just looks incomplete. There are a couple of ways of doing this, however. So for both methods we're going to attach a few pieces, like a few of these wedge pieces, and as well as a couple of 1x2 tiles, and we're going to do that for both. And we're going to do that for both of the feet. So basically, do that, and as far as the heels go, we'll just rotate these around just because. And as far as the heels go, there are a couple of methods you can do. You could use a couple of Nexonite shield tiles and tile up the heel portion like so. Looks good, gives it a nice angular look, adds like some extra like spiky detailing, which is nice. But I'm also aware that not everyone's going to have an abundance of these Nexonite shield like tiles. So another method you could do that's slightly more cost effective is by using a couple more of these cheese slope pieces, and by adding these onto the foot there, it does leave a couple of studs exposed near the heel, but I feel like that works. I feel like this works. It definitely rounds out the foot a little bit, while still filling things out and adding a bit of like an angular kind of look. So either one works. So either one works fine. And I'm honestly am really pleased with either one of these feet designs. But this is the part of the build where it's like you basically do whatever. These are just my favorite methods of tiling the feet up. And so with that, we can now get down to the legs. The parts of the segments of this set that needs the most modification. So let me give you a look at how the leg looks unmodified. Like from some angles it looks okay, but remove the armor piece and you remove this, that is what you have for a leg, which looks unfortunate. It's stuck at a very awkward. Yeah, it just causes so many issues. Like, not only does it look really bad from most angles, it's also, the knee bend is also stuck at a very awkward angle, which can cause it to look like you're squatting over a toilet. Unfortunate. But there are a few methods of fixing that. So one method, and yeah, for the other leg, it's slightly better because it has the gold katana to help break the color scheme up a little bit and help cover up some of these studs. But for the most part, the legs just look way too underdone. They look way too incomplete. So there are a couple methods of fixing this. One method is to tile everything up. So let's move this off to the side and let's start with this one. So for this leg, we can go ahead and start off by adding a little bit of tiling here and there. We have a segment here where it's just a 1x2 translucent orange piece with a couple of tiling, so like arranged like this. And basically, we're just going to slide that into there, and we're also going to for the underside, we're going to like, depending on the color scheme, either add a trans orange boat piece or a black boat piece. Either one works fine. But for this video, I'm going to use the trans orange one. Why not? So trans orange one, there you go. It works fine in black too, but the orange one works for the color scheme as well. And for the other leg, you're basically doing the same thing here, only this time you're going to be adding an additional clip piece as well as a katana, because yeah, this set officially only comes with one of those clip pieces. So you can add it. Yeah, you can add it. Pop it back on, pop the legs back on, and basically you have that. Which yeah, like makes it significantly better, but like it still doesn't solve the issue of the awkward angling of the legs. But don't worry, I have you covered there too. So let's go ahead and take the legs off real quick. Yeet. Okay, so to start off with this leg modification, we're first going to take the leg apart. If it has a sword thing assembly, you can take that off and just like take off and just basically take this whole thing apart. So out of these pieces, this piece, and this piece, set them off to the side. We won't need them. What we're going to do instead is we're going to take a piece, add a hinge piece, and we're gonna add another one too. So what we're gonna do here is we're going to add the other brick piece onto the other hinge and basically just lock that together with the other, basically sandwich that together with the other piece. And then depending on what kind of brackets you have, you can either use a bracket like this and like this to help sandwich that in place, or if you don't have those, you can add a simple black 1x2, and by also adding a bracket, one of these kinds of brackets over that if you don't have enough of these. And the same method works for the reverse for these kinds of brackets, but for now we'll use these ones to be more consistent. And so after that, what we can then do is we can use these pieces here that we grab these from the parts from the set itself. We can then add a grate piece. We can then take a 1x2 and some clips, add that there. Take one of these kind of curved pieces, add that there. Add to this piece over here. And as for like this part here, we're going to add a couple pieces to help fill things out. Add a few pieces here and there. And then after that, we can basically just clip this. We can basically just clip this assembly onto the armor, attach it to the studs, and then flip it up like so to give us a sort of look like that. And then there we have a modified leg like so. And of course, by mirroring that and attaching them to the feet, you can also like add in some boat pieces if you want. I like to add boat pieces. Then after that, you can basically just clip those onto the legs, and bam! We have a very significant upgrade to the legs. With these that can just hinge out. I also removed the vent pieces from the hinge joint because that does make these even more likely to fall off. And yeah, like not only do they add a good amount of detail, you can also unclip them from the hinges, from these hinge joints, to add a bit of articulation. Now it does make things look significantly gappy, and I wonder if there's a way of doing that. Oh wait, I actually have, let me think of something.